I'm John Dennis. I'm running against Nancy Pelosi.
We have the most beautiful state and one of the most beautiful places in the world, and people are leaving.
I'm gonna catch you when all the cameras aren't around, and I'm gonna you up. I'm tired.
He's the chairman of the San Francisco GOP, and he's running against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Step back, everyone.
President's Day. We're actually doing something a little different today. We're trying to sort out, what we're doing on on Periscope and YouTube. So I'm actually doing something unusual today. I am running this off of two cameras, and actually I gotta say my phone camera I think is better than the 4D camera. What do you think, Mario? Can you see it?
Yeah, I can check.
Well, anyway, thanks for coming. Cold, wet day in San Francisco, and we have I don't know. It just we're lucky here. I think we've got really good weather, and if you get accustomed to it, it is really hard to live anywhere else because it's really moderate. We get we're coming to the tail end of our winter from like the middle of December till the beginning of February. Oh, bud, Mario, we just dropped off of Periscope.
Check your phone.
Why don't we just start it up here? It didn't work. Can you get us going on Periscope?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. I see. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, while he's doing that, we have really good weather. I think it's better than LA in the sense that LA is if you live close to the water, actually kind of cool in the summertime. It's nicer closer to the water. I think overall it gets really hot the farther inland you go. We don't really get that in the city of San Francisco. It's a very moderate, temperature and. Like I said, once you get used to it, it's amazing. 60, 65 degree days. I don't know. I like it now. I think it gets too hot elsewhere. But in any event, we have one of those cold ones here today, and that's what's happening. But happy President's Day. I noticed online that we had a lot of people wishing President Trump on Twitter, wishing him a happy President's Day, which I thought was kind of funny. And calling him the best president ever, and anyway, listen, I have a lot of affection for Trump, and I think he accomplished some great things. And actually, this gives me an opportunity to bring something up about sort of my feelings about Trump. Nuance doesn't work in online life. In 280 characters on Twitter or even on Facebook for that matter. Facebook's a platform I don't particularly care for. I've always had a kind of a good following on Facebook, but don't really do much for it because I'm not a big fan. But here's a good opportunity for me to explain my feelings on Trump. So I've always liked Donald Trump. I get the personality. I get how his personality can turn people off. I just kind of like it. I think he's always been funny. He's always been transparent. Anybody who's ever read his book, which I read when it came out, I've got it still sitting up on my bookshelf in hardcover from I think 1988, The Art of the Deal. He's clearly got some sort of like childlike insecurities, right? But he's also self-aware about that. And none of us is perfect. We work towards being balanced, but I think his way of dealing with the balance is just sort of accepting that part of him and being aware of it so that it doesn't come back and haunt him or it doesn't hurt him that much. If you read his book, in terms of transparency, he's always been a hardworking guy. Back then he was already a billionaire, I think, was rich, and he was making like 100 phone calls a day, I totally respected that, because I was in a business that, it was sales business, and in business that and I was responsible for sales, and that kind of hard work is really, I really respect. And so there are lots of things about it, and then also the sort of the New York real estate developer mentality doesn't put me off. I don't really mind that. I just find it funny, but I can see how it gets to other people. Policy-wise, as my friend Tom Woods has said to me in a private conversation, that Trump has a foundation of sand. Whereas I'm a libertarian. I mean, I believe in individual liberty, and I think that's what the country was founded on, and that's what we should be fighting for. Should be our highest value in the pursuit of political happiness. Is seeking so that each of us has as much individual liberty as we possibly can have. The consequence of that is that not only is it kind of the most moral thing, that we leave each other alone, but also, as it turns out, it's the political philosophy that leads to the greatest amount of prospects for developing wealth. The freer a country is, the wealthier it is. The more country protects the individual liberty of the individual, the better it does. No country's perfect, but the closer we get to perfection, the closer we get to that, the better off we all are. So that's been my goal, and in that sense, Trump, I think, doesn't really understand that, but he has really good instincts. And from my perspective, he's probably had the best instincts, libertarian instincts, of any president in my lifetime, and that's the reason why I supported him. But it's also the reason why I wasn't, completely MAGA, one of those, kind of MAGA people. Sure, make America great. I'm thrilled to do that. The way to make America great is to make America free again. The better phrase is probably make America free again. That would be better. And to the extent that Trump did that, and I think he did it more, he was pursuing that agenda and better than any president in my lifetime. I was super supportive. He always seemed to come down, and he also, by the way, opened up my eyes too. I've become sort of, I'm still working my way through this, but more of a sort of a libertarian nationalist, and in the sense that I'm worried about creating our own island of liberty here, and then when it comes to things like trade, trade as much as you can, but understand the downsides of trading with non-free states, with places like China, where dispute resolution is going to be a problem, and then you have and also when you have complications like the Bretton Woods money system, and fiat money, it creates all sorts of tricky complications that make it difficult. But in that regard, I think Trump navigated these waters as well as anybody possibly could. And then when you put him in contrast to Joe Biden, or any of the people that he ran against, in 2016, either on the Republican side when he was going for the nomination or against Hillary Clinton, he was head and shoulders better than those people. And he also, I think one of the things that I really liked about Trump, and I hope, and I liked about him, and I hope to like about him again if he decides to run again, is he's the one guy who really understood the forgotten man, the people I think of mostly in the Midwest, in the middle parts of big states like California, who were decimated by the loss of the manufacturing base, and shipping that all over to overseas, China, Mexico, was really devastating. And he spoke to those people. He understood, whereas the Democrat Party has just come to really mock them. The Democrat Party, which used to be the party of the working class, or at least they purported to be that, now just openly mocks them, mocks them for going to the Olive Garden, mocks them for going to Walmart. So Trump respected those people genuinely, I think, and that's the reason why they were so enthusiastic about him, why his support was so deep with those folks. And Trump also was amazing on on foreign policy. I think he was great. His instincts were not to go to war. We have think about where we are now as opposed to where we were 15 years ago, and specifically in the Republican Party, but in the country in general. We are so done with these wars, so done with them. Trump helped to nail that down. Look, he quashed the whole problem with radical Islam. We didn't have to think about it for 4 years. What does Joe Biden do? I'm going to come back to Joe Biden in a second. So Trump was amazing in that regard. So I've done a sort of a thumbnail review of the Trump presidency. I'm going to do another one a little more in depth in the future, and I'm going to pull out my old whiteboard and do a sort of a pros and cons thing. But on this President's Day, I think it's important to recognize the accomplishments of Donald Trump, why he has been, I got to say, the best president of my life. I mean, I think Jimmy Carter is sort of underrated. When you look at the things that he accomplished, even though he's a Democrat, there was never a bullet fired. He had the hostage disaster towards the end of his presidency, where they tried to hostage rescue disaster, which led to the death of military personnel, which was tragic, and had a really tough economy. But Jimmy Carter did some really great things too. He deregulated the airline industry. Kids don't even understand what that means. Deregulated the phone industry. We wouldn't have mobile phones in a sense if it wasn't for Jimmy Carter. He raised interest rates to get inflation under control. We don't even understand what that means. When we have this inflation, but I think overall so far Trump's the best president of my life. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but really on a lot of high level stuff he did really well. So on this President's Day, I want to say Happy President's Day to former and potentially and perhaps future President Trump. Moving on, let's today, if we can pull up that picture. So I drove by Nancy Pelosi's house. She lives about a mile from me. I live on this one street, and then she lives the next street south, 1 mile up, really close by. And I noticed this the other day. I drive by her house frequently because it's a place where I take my dog for a nice long walk. There's a place where I take my dog for nice long walks in the Presidio, and it's she's on my way there. And in any event, I know when she's in town because there's Secret Service parked outside of our house, and now recently you may remember that Nancy Pelosi had some graffiti written across her garage door. She was tagged, and and it was just a crappy thing for someone to do. I don't like that kind of intimidation. I'm not into this whole Alinsky thing of going to people's houses. If someone was an absolute dictator, yeah, I suppose. If they were pursuing a policy which was going to lead to the deaths of lots of people, yeah, I suppose. But I think it's kind of rare. And these folks who went to like Tucker Carlson's house, for example, or they went they went to Josh Hawley's house last week. They're complete frigging assholes. There's no excuse for that kind of thing. And the government is guilty of. The government's currency and trade is the right that they reserve for themselves to initiate force. So, but that doesn't mean that you have to stoop to certain standards. And going to somebody's house is really a shitty thing to do. And you ought to lose your citizen's card for doing that kind of thing. And I just mean that you should go to jail is what I mean by that. So I'm not for what would happen to Pelosi's house, but brought up an interesting thing. So this police car is parked. So when Pelosi's in town, she has Secret Service parked outside of her house. Perfectly fine. But since the graffiti went up in front of her house, went on her garage door, there have been police parked outside of her house every day when she's not in town. And by the way, she also has, I noticed she has security cameras, as she should, there. And look, I don't begrudge the police spending some time there, to protect her home for some period of time. I hope it does. I mean, it shouldn't go on forever, and I don't begrudge that. But on the other hand, it brings up an interesting point. Pelosi enjoys a level of protection that the average American couldn't even begin to dream of. In fact, she enjoys a level of security that most billionaires don't have. Right? Billionaires don't have Secret Service guys in, two Suburbans parked outside their house. They don't have police watching outside their house when they're not there to make sure that their homes don't get graffitied. And, Steve Scalise, there was a tweet that came out. Actually, Mara should give me a heads up on this. Scalise pointed this out in August, and I just retweeted it, I think, last night. And my tweet, if you go onto my Twitter account, it just says my opponent. Pelosi is on TV saying that we are suffering from a problem with domestic terrorists, and the leader of the domestic terrorists is sitting in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. She said this in August of 2020, August of last year. So what she's saying is that Trump was the head of a terrorist organization, and his supporters, you and I, presumably, were terrorists. And Scalise was saying, this is exactly the sort of rhetoric that got me shot. Because we always remember that it was a Bernie Sanders supporter who shot Steve Scalise and shot him. Rand Paul was on that field that day. A bunch of people were. There was a Capitol policeman, I think he was killed because of this sort of thing. And so here's Pelosi. And, let's look at her life. Pelosi, her father was the mayor of Baltimore. Baltimore was a safe place. She had, her dad controlled the police force. She was never in a dangerous situation. She went to college. I think she went to Georgetown or something, and met her husband, and has lived in really nice neighborhoods in San Francisco for her entire adult life, when she's not been under the protection and the auspices of the protection of the federal government. Here's a person who just lives. She's just never lived in real danger. And at this stage of her life, I think it's really difficult to ask her to be a little more self-aware. Because on the flip side of that, there was an article in the Chronicle this weekend about a guy who moved here from Kansas. And the Chronicle just picked this one guy out. I could give you dozens of examples of people I know who have left San Francisco. But this guy moves from Kansas, gets a good job at a tech company, and he's leaving. He's moving to Dallas. Why? Well, he says it's really expensive, and it's really dangerous. And he said there's a lawlessness here that would shock most Americans. And he's absolutely right. And how is Nancy Pelosi supposed to know about that level of lawlessness when she's got the Secret Service with her all the time, and when she's not home, she's got police protection in San Francisco, SFPD. Again, I don't begrudge either one, but God Almighty, at this stage, can you show a little self-awareness and try and do something to maybe work to protect people who don't enjoy the kinds of government-funded protection, by the way, armed protection, gun protection that you enjoy? I mean, can you try to have a little self-awareness about this? This weekend, 6 people were shot and killed in the Bayview. Cars are being broken into. People's homes are being broken into every single day. Listen, I've lived here a long time. I'm 30 years in San Francisco. Never seen this level of crime. People saying, "Oh, it's not as bad as it used to be." Bullshit. It is for the 30 years that I've been here. I've never seen anything like this. Nothing like this. We used to have people. Oh, well, we still have this, but we had little periods where have big car break-ins. You had to be careful about, where you parked your car, that sort of thing, and never leave anything in it. Well, we have that now. That's back in a big way, but it's way past that. I mean, it's not just that people are breaking into homes. They are. It's not just that, that we're seeing, violent crime up. We've got murders are way up. overdoses are overdoses were up 70% last year. It's it's like sort of a feeling of impending danger, the likes of which I haven't felt since I lived in a public housing project in Jersey City in the 60s and 70s. Especially, we left there the projects in I think it was 76, and I'll tell you what, those last 3 years, they were rough, and it allowed me to go to some place like the Bronx, go to school and feel like, no big deal, But Pelosi's never felt anything like that. But I'm starting to get that same vibe in San Francisco. It's not quite as bad because there's also, I see a level of wealth here and access to great things that I didn't see back then as a kid. But I'm nervous about my daughter, going out and about. We used to let her go places on the bus. I'm sort of over that now. I make sure we're driving her everywhere. She's 14. Let me tell you, when I was a kid, I was on buses in Jersey City going all over the place. But I wouldn't let my daughter do that. I'm talking about a little kid, 10, 11, 9 maybe sometimes, jumping on buses by myself. But we don't see that now. And by the way, let me just take this. So you get the point about what I'm saying about Pelosi. She enjoys a level of protection, dare I say privilege, that the people don't understand. And yet she's willing to stand by, keep flooding the city with federal dollars, and leave people in kind of a level of danger that she would never even begin to understand. And by the way, for those, there's some people, I put this out on Twitter, and people say, "Oh, you don't know how you're running for Congress, and you don't know how city government works," because I say this all the time. I blame Pelosi for the condition of San Francisco, and people look at this jackass, this Republican. He doesn't understand how city government works. I know how friggin' city government works. I'm a real estate developer. Trust me, people. I understand how it works. I run projects through the city. I know I know what I'm talking about. The reason why Pelosi has ownership, for those of you who don't get it, and I know most of the people listening to this do, but for those few who don't get it, Pelosi floods this city with federal dollars. It's one of the reasons why people support her, why they say, "Oh, when you're running against Pelosi, are you going to be able to get those federal dollars?" Pelosi floods the city with federal dollars, and it's just this sort of one-way street. I'm sure I would suspect, I should say, that she uses those federal dollars to capture, for her own leverage, for her own personal advancement. But my point is to leverage those dollars for the advancement of the people who live here. In other words, hey, San Francisco, city of San Francisco, I'm not going to fight for this particular set of dollars. I'm not going to fight for that particular set of dollars. I'm not going to fight for any dollars unless you get your shit together with the homeless problem in San Francisco, unless you get your act together with the violent crime that's happening in San Francisco. That's what I'm talking about. And in that respect, she completely owns it because she's contributing to the problem by continuing to fund the problem. The people in this town who are running this town clearly, they've been running for decades. I mean, the Democrats clearly don't know what they're doing. They are a disaster. They are just if you point out their failures, they call you a racist, and they're constantly using that racist diversion as a distraction to keep you from looking at their failures. And that's what's happening. Nancy Pelosi contributes to that by continuing to give the city federal money and not getting anything in return for it. And she's in a position to do that. Let me tell you something. No one is going against Nancy. We have the San Francisco Democrat Party has a central committee. It's people like I'm the chairman of our Republican Central Committee. San Francisco Democrat Party Central Committee is filled with these progressives, filled with Bernie Sanders supporters, filled with people who don't support Nancy Pelosi, who they see as a corporatist Democrat, and they're probably right. Those people, the San Francisco Democrat Central Committee, unanimously endorsed Nancy Pelosi for Congress, even though they had a Bernie alternative to vote for. You know why they did that? They wouldn't dream about going against Nancy Pelosi. They wouldn't dream. She has so much power. So for you people out there who think that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have any power in the city of San Francisco, you better get your heads out of your butts, because that you don't understand. You're the ones who don't understand about what's happening in San Francisco. So, by the way, so that's the point. She owns this problem as much as anybody else. Exclusively, of course not. But does she have a big chunk of ownership? You're damn straight she does. By the way, just make a quick comment. I want to just jump on this. I mentioned that I went to school in the Bronx, and in the 80s, where if you got, we took the D train and the 4 train. Those were the kind of the big ones that we took. A buddy of mine went to Manhattan, so occasionally I'd jump on that 1 train. That was a scary train. We took that late at night a couple of times, and that one really got my eyes open. And I just want to make a quick comment about this. I know that this controversy has died down a little bit, but I don't want to forget it. AOC was flipping out. She wasn't even in the Capitol. She was in the in the building that has an underground tunnel to the complex. She was in Cannon office building, and I know the layout. So I know she wasn't in actual danger on the day of the day on January 6th when people stormed the Capitol, and her reaction and her response doesn't sound like somebody from the Bronx. Let me just say that. I mean, any person who grew up in the Bronx who would flip out over something like that, especially in the tougher parts of the Bronx, somebody who grew up in like the 90s, the early 2000s. I'm not so sure. I think she's Westchester Sandy Cortez, and also her response also strikes me as someone who I'm sorry, I'm just getting distracted. Are you guys hearing sound? Someone hears. Sherry says that she had no sound. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, her response seems to me like somebody who's been through a really bad trauma. Okay, thanks, Mario. Sandy Cortez, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She strikes me as someone who's had a terrible trauma in her life, and so when she thought that they were coming to get her, she panicked. As opposed to the congresswoman from Iowa who was the mom, who was a Democrat, who was calming her down, saying, "We're okay. Sit in my office. I'll take care of you." So anyway, all right. So I'm off that. So that's the thing with Pelosi. Pelosi owns the problems that are happening in San Francisco. She's been a train wreck in that regard for the quality of life. Look, she's brought money in, but the money has just made things worse. She's just funded, provided the capital for the destruction of the city. That's all she's done. And she should maybe try and be a little more self-aware about the people who actually have to live with the consequences of her failures. Okay, let's move on to the Biden mess. So yeah, let me just go over this really briefly because this is the big issue. Biden ran on all of these topics that he was going to do so much better than Trump. Trump was a disaster in this way; he was bad in that way. And we're in almost a month now into the Biden presidency, and he's been very active with the executive orders. But can someone tell me what he's really changed? Because I've been thinking about it, and I haven't seen. I mean, aside from like the Keystone Pipeline, which was bad, a bad change. But where are these dramatic changes that he promised? On foreign policy, the only thing he's done is he put our troops in harm's way in a really complex situation where nobody's a good guy in Syria, a situation that Trump had pretty much solved and resolved. And the U.S. wasn't entangled in the middle of. He put our troops back in there, putting us in jeopardy, creating a new opportunity for the U.S. to get dragged into another quagmire in the Middle East. So that was bad. But like on other things, they deny that he had that Trump had a vaccination plan. I mean, that's a lie. They were already vaccinating over 1 million people a day when Trump left office. They said that he and Harris have both said that they weren't given a vaccination plan. They were. It was in place. It was happening. So there's really been no change there. There's been no change overall in COVID policy. Trump got the vaccine done. Now we're just vaccinating people. The Iran policy, no change there. He said he was going to get us back in the Iran deal. Not doing that. Not a bunch of China policy changes just yet. He said that he wants to expand trade with China and kind of reducing tensions. And the Chinese have been quietly applauding Biden because Biden's their guy. But here's the thing that people aren't talking about that I think is really a massive scandal, and we have to speak up about this. Hunter Biden still owns shares in the company that is doing business with China, and he's saying he's working to unwind his position. Well, for Christ's sakes, Biden was elected in November. It's February. We're coming up on March. It's been, it's 3.5 months now since he was elected. So, by the way, they were so confident that Biden was going to win with those phony polls, why wasn't Hunter Biden unwound out of that position before Election Day? And I'll tell you the reason why he wasn't, because the mainstream media blocked all of the information, all the stories about his corruption. So think about this for a second. We have the son of the President of the United States. When that president was the vice president, the son flew on Air Force Two to China with his father, met the head of the Chinese Sovereign Wealth Fund. That's Chinese Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is very difficult to get foreign investment with. Wall Street guys have been trying, big players trying for 10 years, 8 years, trying to get some investment, barely get something. Hunter Biden flies in on Air Force Two with his daddy, and in 3 days gets $1.5 billion investment. And the investment, that's money that they are investing on behalf of the Chinese government. But, in those funds, you get management fees, probably around a point or so. So that means $15 million a year to the firm that Hunter works for, just for getting that. Plus, they usually get a percentage of the upside, frequently 20%. So if they're up, even a modest, let's say they're up 10%, is a big number, but say they're up 10% in a year. It's $150 million, and they get 20% of that, $30 million on top of the 15 that they already took out. Pretty lucrative little plane ride. This guy, his dad is the president of the United States, and he hasn't unwound out of that position? Wow. What is going on here? Where's the media? Where's the press? Of course, you're not going to hear it. I mean, I've heard rumors that, or word that CNN is starting to get a little more aggressive with the Biden administration. They're sort of veering back a little bit towards real journalism. Oh yeah? Why don't you take on this story? Going to be tough to do since you totally quashed it, since we weren't even allowed to talk about it on social media. I had my tweets, blocked on social media. Twitter informed me that they were being, blocked, and they had messages or little warnings next to them because we were talking about Hunter Biden in just prior to the election. All stories that turned out to be true, and he still isn't unwound out of the position. This is a massive scandal. We have a president of the United States who is compromised by a dictatorship. Holy sh! Okay, anyway, I mean, we are in a sort of scary place right now where this is allowed to happen right in front of your eyes, and nobody cares. They just put it in your face and say, so what? So, anyway, we got to keep fighting against this. We got to keep holding these people to account. Nancy Pelosi needs to go. She's 82 years old. We got to really kind of move on at this point. She's 81 now. Oh, she's going to be, actually, she and my daughter have the same birthday. So I think Pelosi's going to be 81. I think she was born in 1940. Yeah. So anyway, we're coming to the end of the road. We've got to replace Pelosi. We've got to really go after the heart of the people who are making this happen. if I can fault Trump on something, one of the things I don't think he really understood was how how deeply he needed to clean house when he first got into office, or how he had to really deeply clean the government of the bureaucratic, the administrative state in Washington, and we've got to go after that part too. But in the meantime, we can certainly go after some figureheads. So obviously Biden's got to go in 24, and then Pelosi we can hopefully replace in 2022. So that's it for today. I want to thank you for joining us as always. I really appreciate your following. Please hit the like sign and subscribe on YouTube. The YouTube subscriptions are really what we're pushing right now. Would love to get some help there. And then of course follow us on Twitter at Real John Dennis. On YouTube, that, by the way, that's John Dennis Report. And then go ahead and follow us on Twitter at Real John Dennis, Instagram Real John Dennis, and John Dennis for Congress on Facebook. Oh, and let me just close the show today and do this in sort of honor. This is what we do at the at our meetings. I want to say goodbye to my friend Dave Knoll, who was a colleague on the vice chairman of a national organization called the Republican Liberty Caucus, which you should also follow, Republican Liberty Caucus. And Dave was a longtime member and a real stalwart of liberty politics. We frequently disagreed. There are different variations of libertarianism. Dave was one type, and we disagreed on that board, which I think was healthy for the board. But Davis had a big intellect. He was a very smart guy, very accomplished guy, and he passed away from COVID on Sunday or Saturday night, early Sunday morning, from COVID. So let's close today's live stream in the honor of Dave Knoll. Dave, we'll miss you. We'll carry on the fight for you. All the best. Thanks for subscribing, everybody. See you soon.